In the town of Mfuwe, which is located in the Luangwa River Valley of eastern Zambia, surrounded by woodlands and terrain, lies a village so small that most probably don't know that it even exists. The area is known for having an abundance of big game, attracting trophy hunters from all over the world. However, in 1991, the roles would be reversed, and the hunters would become the prey when a massive lion that had some rather odd behavior began hunting all who were unfortunate enough to be in its path, and which would gain a reputation so far as even being called a shape-shifting demon, known only as the Terror of Mfuwe. Join me and welcome to Tales from the Den. It all began on July 9th of 1991, when two boys were walking home along one of the area's roads. When out from the night came a huge lion, the biggest the boys had ever seen. Terrified and frozen with fear, the boys didn't know what to do except stand still as their hearts raced and they began to tremble. Then all of a sudden, the lion rushed the boys and grabbed one of them and dragged him off as he was screaming and thrashing into the brush of night. Horrified and scared beyond measure, the other boy ran as fast as he could, screaming for help. After continuously running until he could no longer run anymore, the boy was finally able to get to the village and gather the adults for help. But when the armed village men arrived at the scene of the incident, it was too late. The other boy had vanished, leaving behind merely some scraps of clothing and pieces of bloody bone and flesh. This would only be the beginning of the brutal and violent attacks, as less than a month later, a local woman on the outskirts of the village was sleeping in the calm of night when all of a sudden the lion came and she was dragged from her hut, only to be devoured and torn apart. As her deafening screams were heard from the nearby villagers, they followed and sprinted towards the screams, armed with rifles and machetes, but they were unable to find her until the morning, and when they finally located her, the only thing remaining was her severed head and arms, setting in a disturbing reminder of the ferocity of the lion. The following night, another local boy was attacked and dragged away in full view of a ranger station, with one of the rangers even firing a shot at the creature, but missing, which thankfully was enough to cause the lion to drop the boy. But due to the severity of the wounds inflicted by the attack, the boy would later die at the hospital due to blood loss and severe bodily trauma. With the ranger sighting, having him get a good look at the animal, a true idea of the immense size of the lion was observed. The rangers described the lion as not having a typical mane, which is a thick collar of hair around a lion's neck, and being approximately 10 feet in length from head to tail, and 5 feet in height from paw to the shoulder, perhaps even weighing in at an estimated 500 pounds, which would make it a very large specimen indeed. In the meantime, though, it was becoming obvious that the area had a man-eater roaming about. The attacks continued, with the predator killing several more people in the coming months, usually in broad daylight, and often lurking into people's homes to take them. The lion would show some remarkable stealth for its size, being able to avoid rangers and traps, as well as show some rather bold and odd behavior. One day, the lion attacked and killed a village woman named Jesseline by snatching her right off the front entrance to the hut that she was staying in front of a ranger patrol who was out searching for the creature. The rangers rushed after the lion, but were too late to stop the brutal attack. Another instance, which was even bolder and more mysterious, was that the lion returned the next day to the same exact hut that it killed the woman in. The lion entered the hut, picked up a laundry sack in its jaws, and then walked back outside to the center of the town. As horrified people looked on, it then allegedly, according to the townspeople, put the bag down, then proceeded to let out a defiant, ear-splitting roar, after which it picked the sack back up and ran off into the woods. From that day on, the lion would always be seen with the laundry sack, sometimes even being seen playing with it, but it was always seen with it from that day on. The lion would reportedly leave the bag, only to go off to hunt, but always coming back to retrieve it, and typically not letting it out of its sight, leading villagers to believe that the bag was an omen, or perhaps even cursed. Not only that though, there were more rumors amongst the villagers that this was no ordinary lion, but rather a supernatural demonic entity, or a shape-shifting witch doctor or shaman. The native people of many locals of Africa have long believed that evil spirits and shamans have the power to take form of lions, and this belief is so prevalent that the families of such victims will often not tell authorities, as they feel that they have been visited by retribution for something they or their relatives have done wrong in the past. In some cases of lion attacks, villagers will actually consult with a shaman or a village medicine man to try and determine if the attack was by a normal animal or a supernatural spirit in disguise. If the animal is deemed to be a normal lion, it is seen as just nature running its course. But if it's the work of a demon, then that is when the villagers are truly terrified. These superstitious beliefs are so prevalent that villagers will often take justice into their own hands by lynching those that they think are responsible for the lion attacks, and by doing so, only furthering the bloodshed. In the case of the Mfuwe lion, the general consensus of the elders was that this was a supernatural creature, and so people were absolutely terrified, cowering within their homes and refusing to go out at night. One local safari hunter named Adrian Carr, who set up a trap to try and kill it, had a rather eerie encounter of the beast, of which he says this: "He came soon after midnight, or at least that's when I first became aware of him. I could hear his footfall, circling my paper-bagged fortress. My 2 heavy rifles, 3 flashlights, and handgun were little comfort. It went quiet for a bit, and then I heard him feeding on the bait. I let him settle into the feeding for 20 minutes, and then I put the light on him. I still have the mental image of him standing up on his hind legs, very big and tall, maneless and pale. I was ready to shoot, but the instant the light hit him, he dropped and was gone. He never came back, too late however to do anything else. If I was to retain my casual demeanor and reputation of disdain for the magical beliefs that are always associated with man-eaters. Privately, of course, I was seriously doubting the wisdom of the whole enterprise, Carr was ultimately unable to kill the lion, and it continued on with its attacks on the village. Throughout all of this, the animal avoided traps, poisons, numerous hunting excursions, and ranger patrols, often defiantly appearing to roar at the armed men, almost as if it was taunting them. As the death toll mounted in August of 1991, a California man on safari named Wayne Hosek and his companion, professional hunter Carl Bukes, were called in to try and put a stop to the lion's reign of terror. But this would prove to be easier said than done. The hunters started by talking to villagers and getting an idea of the lion's habits and pattern of attacks, and in the process learning about the bag that it had a strange and unusual attachment to, which would be a piece of information that would help them in the hunt. And it just so happens that the two men had luck of coming across the sack in a dried up riverbed, with Hosek even remarking in his journal that even the birds lounging in the area seemed to be giving the bag a wide space. They took this as a sign that the lion was around, and so they built a snare and placed bait around the area where the bag was, but it would not make an appearance despite the fact that they could hear it shuffling and stalking about the area. Over the coming days, they would change spots for the trap several times with no luck. In fact, the lion proved to be extremely evasive and clever, often waiting to take the bait from right under them when they were in the process of moving, and on another occasion, even successfully retrieving the bag. It would often circle them both night and day, and was smart enough to figure out the angle of approach that best allowed it to reach the area where they set up the bait without being seen. The lion often appeared to stalk about the nearby area where they were, avoiding the trap, managing to avoid getting hit by their rifles, and seeming to be almost mocking the hunters. Paranoia set into the hunters when Hosek's camera broke when he tried to take a picture of the lion's tracks. He even began to wonder if there was something supernatural about this beast. Night after night, they waited, the lion circling them and taunting them, until both exhaustion and obsession settled into the men. Hosek would give the whole thing a rather mystical quality. When he would write this, we knew he could be seeing us at any time, and we felt him, whether in his hunting area or returning to camp several miles away. It was as if a spirit was around, watching us continuously. By this, we felt that we had come to know this lion in a most strange way. We were all near exhaustion. Sleep was out of the question. It was simply futile to try. I had come to hunt, and it was this very fact that we perhaps clung on to in order to convince ourselves that he was not controlling our lives. What, I asked, would happen should this lion decide to come into the blind and confront us? Willie's response seemed so logical that it made perfect sense to me, and so it put me completely at ease about such an attack. He said simply, if he comes into the blind, there will be 3 guns waiting for him, and he will be killed. With that, I never gave it a second thought, but he apparently did give it many thoughts himself, as he later told me he would never close his eyes, because he held that to be a real possibility with this lion. Being a man-eater, he didn't want to give him one instant of advantage. Realizing that the lion was exploiting the times that they have moved locations, they decided to pretend by acting like they were moving, so that it would let its guard down. They would build a trap, leave bait, and then leave. But instead of changing positions, they hid in the same spot nearby. And ultimately the strategy worked. They soon saw the lion approaching the abandoned trap, and Hosek would write this as he saw the lion approach. From my view of the lion's body movements, from behind the cover of the tree stump, He wasn't walking calmly as I had seen many other lions walk, as when undisturbed. He was in a quick stride, almost trotting. Reaching the tree, he then stepped out from behind it, to our left, and I saw him for the first time. He was huge. He trotted right past the bait and turned his face to the blind, and snarled. He knew we were there, and as Carl had accurately predicted, he was moving and picking up speed. We would never see him standing still, at least not alive. Hosek then took aim and fired from his rifle, and was able to land a direct shot behind its left shoulder, causing it to fall to the ground, killing it instantly. An examination of the corpse would not only show just how truly enormous the lion was, but also that it was a maneless male lion, and completely healthy and in fine physical shape, making it a bit strange and unusual that it would have become a man-eater in the first place, as the ones that do are typically sick, elderly, or injured, and they are most often females. Hosek would write of the surreal experience of having finally killed the beast and seeing its body lying there. As he writes this, "Finally, I looked at the man-eater. He lay almost as if he were asleep, yet I could not bring myself any closer to him and remained 25 feet away. Suddenly a story my friend Mickey told me years earlier came to me. He told me that he heard that when one first sees the lion he is hunting, it looks gigantic, but then after shooting it, the lion immediately looks much smaller. But as the hunter approaches the dead animal, the lion grows in size with each step until regaining its true size, at the very least in the eyes of the hunter. It took me 30 minutes or more before I could bring myself to go up from behind and touch the lion. My camera had broken when I had photographed the lion's track mark next to my foot earlier in the day. Carl had brought his along, and it also refused to function as well. Was this a curse from the beast, I asked? It didn't matter to those of us who were gathered there, of course. After all, the best picture is the one that remains in a person's heart. Now that was all over, the villagers were caught up in celebration over the carcass of the lion. Shamans even did rituals over it to make sure that its perceived supernatural powers were banished for good. The Mfuwe lion would be taken to a taxidermist and put on display at the Field Museum in Chicago, along with the sack that it had an unusual attachment to. Hosek would go on to write a memoir on his experiences with the lion in his book called The Man-Eater of Mfuwe, and although the total body count for the lion is unknown, it is cemented in the lore of the region as one of the most mysterious and deadly of its kind, managing to create incredible panic and talk of supernatural powers even amongst those who were hunting it. To this day, the lion of Mfuwe remains one of the largest man-eaters known. Its behavior and intelligence, still shrouded in mystery, it has managed to become a curious and frightening historical oddity that we may never fully understand. Thanks for watching. Till next time.
Oh.